It's recorded. Hey guys, we're starting a new session today. The first part of the session was not recorded because I was just doing kind of a basic overview. But as a very for anyone watching the video right now, um, there were two main big updates. The first one was we actually got rid of the eBay client.java, and the reason why we got rid of the eBay client.java is because and let me restore this real quick. eBay discard this change. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it again real quick. The reason why I got rid of this change was because if you look at our eBay, where is it called? If you look at inside our eBay client, what we had earlier was a generate eBay access tokens token session, right? But and we're basically manually calling the this specific curl request in order to go ahead and get our token. But if you look at eBay's uh, documentation, they have their own library that you can go ahead and import. So if you guys remember, some time ago, I talked about Maven being a dependency management, right? So we were able to copy this and put it inside our POM file. So I'll show you in our Git. If you look at our POM.xml, I copied and pasted and added eBay's code in here. So now, in theory, if we use eBay's own code, we can go ahead and generate ourselves a access token whenever we want without having to go ahead and create our own curl request. So that's why we're removing it. So over here, I'm going to go to the eBay client and I'm going to refactor and delete this. Okay, so now that that's gone, I also created something called an eBay controller. And so our first endpoint that we're going to make today is something called generate eBay token. And so whenever we call this endpoint, generate eBay access token, basically what's going to happen is our program will be going ahead and generating and returning to us an eBay access token. So if you guys remember, inside the controller class, we never put any actual hard-coded hardcore logic, right? All the logic is deferred to where? The service class. So I'm going to the service class, but inside the service class, there's only the card cache service. This is a eBay related logic, right? Because this is an eBay endpoint. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file called the eBay service, right? And inside eBay service, obviously, we need to add in the annotation at the very top at service to denote and denote to Spring Boot that, hey, this is a service class and we are allowed to auto wire it. And if you guys remember what auto wiring is, we're basically letting Spring take control and initiate and instantiate objects for us so we don't have to worry about it. So inside our service class, what we might do is create another method called eBay access token DTO and get eBay access token. Perfect. And over here, what we're going to do is we're going to auto wire a eBay service type object. And inside eBay service, I'm just going to get an eBay access token and I'm going to return that. All right. Perfect. All right. So now let's actually code all the logic behind the eBay service, right? What is it supposed to do? Well, really, we don't even really need to do any logic because earlier on we had to create our own post request onto eBay servers in order to go ahead and get that access token. But what we learned was that eBay actually has their own GitHub library, right? And so you can see over here the supported types of tokens that they support are application tokens and user tokens. We're doing an application token because this is an application, right? And the grant type is going to be client credentials, right? So let's see how this is done. so if we use the call OAuth to API.get application token, then it's supposed to complete this for us. But let's read through this entire documentation and see how it works. Let's see here. Designed to be used with eBay. One moment. All right, so this is just the introduction. There's nothing interesting here, but right, and basically it's saying that all the documentation is available at developer.ebay.com. Right, installation is done with Maven, so getting started, perfect. All interactions with this library can be performed using this, and this is how we instantiate a new object of OAuth to API. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, that looks beautiful. Let's import this class. All right, looks like they found it. Ensure that you have the config file in your source code type YAML. Refer to eBay config sample.yaml. Huh. Do we have a YAML? We have application.properties. This file will hold all of your application credentials such as, refer to, got it. Once this is created, call credential load.load new file input stream your config location to load the credentials, And it is important to load the credentials at startup time and initialization to prevent runtime delays. Got it. Once the credentials are loaded, call any operation on OAuth to API. So basically what this is telling us is we want to create a source code of type YAML. Now, YAML is just basically another type of properties file. So we're calling ours application.properties. There's another one called, you could use something called application.yaml. It's the same exact thing. It's just a different file extension. Not a huge deal. I'll give an example here. This is an example YAML file. And you can see over here that this is an example, right? And so the difference between a .properties file and a .yaml file is this. If I go into my application.properties file, you can see that for example, I've spring.servlet.multipart.enabled. So there are 4 subclasses here, right? Over here, they've defined it by using tabs. So over here is Xmas 5th day is the first one. Then calling birds is the second. And then, or in this case, partridges is another second one. And the third object, for example, the third subclass would be count. So over here, for example, we would do spring.servlet would be this one. .multipart will be over here. And underneath all that will be .enabled. We would add another subclass right below and tab it in. And then we would put, instead of 1, we would put true. So it's just another way to kind of express data types. So we can just create a new object here under resources called maybe eBay config, eBay config.yaml. We're going to add that in. And so inside this eBay config.yaml, we're going to go ahead and include in YAML format some of the all of the credentials that we're looking for. So something like eBay client credentials, client ID, I think something like that, and client secret. Something like that. I don't know what their exact parameters are. We'll have to keep looking through documentations, but this is like an example. And we have to look under our YAML file here. One moment. YAML spring YAML add, because we're using, what was it called? Environmental variables. Let's take a look at how it's done. Externalized configuration. using YAML instead of properties. So you see under Spring Docs, instead of using application.properties, we could in theory use application.yaml, but it's just not what's default. But either way, it still works. And we can see here, can we do environment? So it can be supplied on command line with an environmental variable. For example, Unix shell, Spring application, blah, blah, blah. Let me take a look at some examples here. They've got to have an example. They don't have an example, but we are able to import environmental variables. So something along the lines of maybe something like this. And hopefully that works. If it doesn't work, we can kind of experiment with it a little bit more later on. And then let's keep reading the thing here. This file will hold all your application properties, such as app, dev ID, or cert ID, referred to creating eBay developer account. Once the file is created, call credential util.load to load the credentials. It is recommended that you load the credentials during startup time. Okay, so basically we have to go ahead and copy this and paste it inside our startup time code. So over here, we have our startup code. And it's telling us before anything even starts, we should go ahead and run this piece of code. And our config location, that's going to be very difficult. Let's see how we can do that here. File, Java. Okay. Because, for example, when I start this project, right, the problem is the place that we store this project is going to be very different, right? So for my computer, where this object is, if I look at it, right, it's under Documents, under GitHub. So for me, in order to find this file, you would have to go all the way over to C users, Jason Chan, Documents, GitHub, Underdog Devs, Card Arbitrage, right? But say, Amber, if you're running this on your computer, or Mo or Greg, this could be a totally different location. So we have to tell Java to find it in its own relative path instead of an absolute path. So if I do something like, if you know the root folder of your project, you can use a relative path. For example, if your file is located in source main this and your project root is my project, you can use source main. Okay, so we can just go ahead and
we lost your screen.
And grab it directly through. Sorry?
Oh, we lost your screen.
Oh, okay, my bad. Let me go ahead and restart the screen sharing. You can see my screen again? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to grab it directly from a relative path instead of the direct path. And so we probably put something along the lines of something like, where is this located here? You can see source main resources. Source main resources, and instead of myfile.txt, it would be eBay config.yaml. Perfect. And since this is a hard-coded line, what I'm going to end up probably doing is putting it inside our constants file. Public static string resource path, or eBay resource YAML path. something like that. I'll copy that and paste it in here. Perfect. Okay. And let's continue reading through here. Oh, you know what? I think I know. I think I have an idea of exactly how to name this. One moment. Let me open up the pom.xml real quick here. com.ebay.auth. Yeah, it doesn't exist. Okay, so I don't actually know how to run that properly, but we'll figure that out. So, all the regular OAuth specifications and refresh token are supported. Perfect. So, if we want client credentials, this type of grant type can be performed by simply using OAuth.getApplicationToken. So, if I copy this, in theory, and I paste it inside here, then it should work. Okay, and there are 2 arguments inside that need to be completed. Read more about this grant type over here. And it's requesting for a OAuth 2 model environment file and also a string of scopes. Okay, I don't know about environments, but I know about scopes. Let's take a look at environment here. Environment. We're looking for sandbox or production. And so, let me take a look at the string. Is this a... Got it. Okay. Production environment, and what's the other object that it needs here?
Sandbox?
No, it needs a list of scopes. So, scopes. So, do you guys know what scopes are in OAuth or no?
No.
Okay, let me explain that to you. So, over here we have a cert ID and a cert password, right? And so, using both the certificate client ID and the client secret, which are the username and password, we could generate tokens, right? And so these tokens, we can... Oh, sorry?
Oh, no, we lost that. It's showing hopscotch.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. It glitches out every now and then. I have no idea why. Okay. So you guys can see my screen again, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Whiteboard online. So let me go ahead and kind of draw this out for you guys so you understand what's going on here. So this is how OAuth in a very huge nutshell works. So over here, if you guys remember, I have a client ID and a client secret, so a username and a password, right? For all intents and purposes, a client ID and a client secret are basically a username and a password, right? So using the username and password, I will then exchange it to eBay's API, and I will get an API key. I will get a token that I can use. Now, this token has an expiration date, right? And so using this token, I can then go ahead and call eBay's API to like buy stuff, to like sell stuff, all sorts of functions on eBay. You guys kind of follow this flow so far on how eBay works? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's focus on just this part. When I'm exchanging my username and password for a key, there are many, many, many different types of keys, right? And a username and password can generate multiple keys. So, say for example, if I trust you, Greg, and I also trust you, Amber, right? I trust both of you guys with my account. It's not like only one of you guys can use my account at the same time. If I generate a token, I can generate two tokens, and I can give one token to you, Amber, and I can give one token to you, Greg, and both of you guys can go ahead and kind of like act as me to go ahead and perform actions on my behalf to buy, sell, and do stuff whenever you want. But say for example, Amber, you're only supposed to be buying stuff, so you shouldn't be selling at all. So the token that I want to give you should only allow you to buy stuff. And say, Greg, for example, you're an administrator, and so you can both buy and sell stuff. I trust you for both of them, and so your key should be able to go ahead and both buy and sell and whatever else, right? So what a scope does is you're saying, hey, here's your username and password eBay, but when you generate this key, add in a scope. And this scope would tell them, hey, for this particular key, what kind of powers do we want to give it? Do we want to give it just buying powers? Do we want to give it selling powers? What kind of powers should this key have? And so that's the idea behind it. And so if I open up my GitHub real quick and I take a look over here, yes, so I can tell it the scope is what type of items it can do. So anything on these endpoints, API/scope, it's able to go ahead and complete. If it goes on any other sort of APIs, for example, then it's out of the scope. This token is not valid for that particular operation. Does that kind of make sense? Clarify things a little bit?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
kind of like a permission.
Right, exactly. And so you can see over here, the client credentials grant request, we have a scope list. And so you give eBay a list of scopes that it should be allowed to do and shouldn't be allowed to do, right? So let's take a look here. And expecting a new list of scopes, right? So if I do something like list, actually, if I go ahead and I go under my over here, and I do something like public static eBay class eBay config, maybe I will move refactor. Can I move this? Move members to I've never tried this refactor before, but let's see if it works. eBay config refactor. Oh. Ah, perfect. It moved it over. Okay. So and move that over, and maybe I'll add one more item, and instead maybe I'll do something like eBay resource, eBay default scope, right? Scope list. And so maybe I'll do something like public static list string okay, and obviously it's no longer going to be this. It's going to be list dot of, and what was the previous scope I had? Right here. This bad boy. Perfect. and I will move that inside of here. Perfect. And oh, right, one more thing. It could throw an IO exception, but I don't like that because an IO exception is extremely broad, right? And so what I probably am going to do instead is I'm probably going to put this inside a try catch, right? So I'm going to do something like try and catch. Exception E. And if any exception occurs, then I can do something like this. Throw eBay bad eBay credential exception, right? And so bad eBay credential exception is a new exception that we just created, right? It's out of thin air. It's not like a exception that is commonly known inside the Java class. So what I'm going to do is inside my exceptions class, I'm going to create a new Java class, bad client eBay exception, and I'm going to kind of copy the idea behind all of these. Public class extends runtime exception. And inside, I might add in a little bit of an error message. Might be fun, right? And so over here, when I throw a new over here, and I might put in a little friendly message like eBay client X client or eBay client token or credentials invalid, right? And so inside the exception handler, if you guys remember, what's going to end up happening is, say, for example, my eBay client credentials are expired. They're no longer valid. The username and password are bad, right? This line of code will go ahead and throw an IO exception. And because we put it inside the try catch block, Java will catch this exception and instead throw a new exception. And what will it throw? It will throw something called a bad eBay credential exception. And so this bad eBay credential exception we just created, right? And so over here, what we want to do is we want to tell Spring, hey, when a bad eBay credential exception is thrown, right? We want to go ahead and throw not a bad request exception, but a bad credential exception. And over here, for the response entity, it's not found, it's dot. What's the 500? Not bad gateway. Let's take a look at this. Cat HTTP status codes. It's probably a 500, right? Because this is technically on our end. It's on the server's fault, so we would be throwing an internal server error, right? Perfect. And so that's how we would deal with this particular error if it were to occur. Looks good. And now let's figure out exactly what's going on here. Right. So we are actually not getting an eBay access token DTO back. What are we getting back? We're getting back a OAuth response. So let's take a look at this. OAuth response. So that's the object type we're getting back. I have no idea what it looks like. Okay, and OAuth response dot get access token. Right. So it shows the access token. And inside our DTO that we just created, we can see that we have the access token, the expires in, and the token type. Does it expire? There's no expiration? Wow, it doesn't tell us when the expiration is. That is very concerning, actually. Huh. Okay. That's fine. No expiration.
It's
So I guess.
probably in the access token.
Oh, probably.
So you have to decode it and then get each claim inside that token.
Yeah, it's a custom type. That's
But
annoying.
so there's
Yes, get expires on. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Dot get token, get expires on. Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say? I cut you off by accident.
No, I was just saying that for a token, or like for this token response, like just from the RFC, there's like certain claims that are required for a token, and they're usually like the issuer, the expiration date, and like issued time.
Right.
Something like that.
But yes, we can see that we can get the access tokens token and the expiration time. So what we can do here is we can do something like we can create a builder, something like a eBay return eBay access token DTO dot build. Oh, I don't have a builder class here. Builder. And what a builder is basically instead of having to go ahead and instantiate a new object and then afterwards set the access token that expires in a token type, we can directly tell the builder, hey, instantiate and put these objects in. So I'll show you exactly how that's used right now. So over here, I'm going to do eBay access token dot builder dot access token dot expires in. And instead of expires in, I'm probably going to change and refactor it here. Rename to expiration date. Oh shoot. I think it's date. Yes, they use dates. Okay. And what's the last token type? Token type. Perfect. So we can do something like get token here. Expiration date. We can go ahead and paste in here. And inside the token type, I can go ahead and create an enum. Where is it? There it is. We can what they call it? I think it was application token. Was it just all lowercase? Application token, yeah. So okay. Application token dot name. Okay, so in these couple lines of code, essentially what's going to happen is what we're going to do. Actually, we need to do one last thing beforehand. We need to go ahead and do this. Because OAuth response, remember, when we get the access token, it's something called an optional. An optional could be null. It might or might not be null. So if the thing is empty, then we're going to throw a bad eBay credentials exception and say something like eBay token is empty. And otherwise, if the optional does contain valid data, then we're going to return it back to the client. I know I kind of went through this pretty quickly, but I was wondering if this makes sense to you guys so far, or if there's any part of it, or even if the whole thing doesn't make sense, please let me know before I continue. Does this make sense? Yes? No? Can I get like a feedback from you guys?
In general, you're getting the token, you're processing it, and then you're moving forward. Or if you don't get the token and something else, you're gonna give the exceptions. I just have to look at it a little bit more to kind of understand everything with all the different classes that are going on. But I get the overall idea.
Sure. So let's do this. This isn't going to work so far yet because we haven't read through the entire documentation. There's a part of it that's missing, right? Because remember, in the very beginning, it's saying, "Hey, go ahead and load this file," but it never told us how this file structure is supposed to be, right? Like where the tokens are supposed to exist on this file. So it's not going to work so far yet. But we can do a little bit more documentation reading on our next session. But for now, before I end the video and end our session, why don't we do this? I'm going to give a very quick 5-minute kind of overall. I'm going to go through what we did today and what each of the changes do. And then that way you guys can better understand what's going on. Yeah?
Okay.
So what we did today earlier was obviously we removed the eBay client. So that's gone. So how the hell do we get our eBay access tokens and expiration dates and all that fun stuff, right? So the first thing we did was we created our own eBay controller. And what does the eBay controller do? The eBay controller creates new APIs, and we created a new API called Generate eBay Access Token, right? And so this endpoint, theoretically, when we hit it and when it does work and when we figure out all the bugs and work out all the kinks, then it will return a JSON object. And inside this JSON object, it will contain our access token, the expiration date of the access token, as well as the token type, right? And in this case, we hard-coded the token type to be a application token. But in theory, we could change it to any other sort of token type. So inside this method, remember all of the logic happens where? It happens inside the service class. And so inside the service class, basically, we're using an object called OAuth2API. And you might be wondering, okay, where the hell does this object come from? Like we never coded something called OAuth2API, right? And so this file was actually coded by eBay. eBay made this Java code. And so let's take a look at this. If I go onto eBay OAuth Java client, which is what eBay's API gave us, we can see that in order to grab eBay's code and use it, all we have to do is import a dependency. And this dependency is done by these 5 lines of code. And so we can see over here inside our pom.xml, we added this dependency inside. So the moment we add this inside, Maven will say, hey, that's very cool. I know that I need to grab eBay's code. And so the moment Maven grabs and downloads eBay's code, that's why we're able to use eBay's code right here, OAuth2API. This is what eBay made. Even though we never coded it, we kind of just imported it. Okay, very cool. So now, if we continue reading the documentation, it's telling us to get this set up. And the first step to getting this set up is to what? Create a YAML file. And a YAML file basically is a file that contains very basic setup information. And in this case, this YAML file contains what? Our dev ID, our app ID, and our cert ID, right? And so over here, we did the same thing. We created a YAML file we created a client ID and a client secret. And there's actually one other thing that we're missing. We have to add in. It's called the app ID. So actually, we can very quickly put that in now, right? Client app ID. $, eBay app ID. And I will go ahead and edit this. I will add in this item here and developer.ebay.com. Actually, I think I have it here. This is the app ID. So I will copy that, paste it in. Okay, apply, close. Okay, perfect. So now, in theory, if these are correct, when we start the program, eBay will be able to grab the, I can actually remove it from here. eBay will be able to grab the client secrets, the client IDs, and the app IDs directly from here. Okay, very cool. So, and that is done right when our program starts. Right when the program starts, it will grab our YAML file and grab the ID, client, and app ID. Okay. So now let's continue onwards in our service class. Our service class is saying, hey, go ahead and use eBay's code. Remember, we never coded OAuth response. If we look at it, it was done under com.ebay.api.client. So eBay coded this. Go ahead and get an application token. In our application token, we are getting an environment of production environment, and we want the scope of eBay, api.ebay.com/OAuth/API scope. So anything under that API, we want. That's the kind of permissions we want to give to that token. Very cool. So eBay's code will go ahead and try to generate a token for us. As soon as it's done, we want to make sure that the token isn't just empty, it's not null, there isn't an error that happened. And if there is an error that happened and we don't get a valid token back, we're going to throw an exception here, a custom exception that we just made. And we'll go into that in just a moment. And assuming that everything was fine, we have a valid token, we'll go ahead and return this object back, right? And inside this JSON object, what we'll have the access token that we grabbed, we'll have the expiration date that we grabbed from this object, and we'll have the token type, which is an application token. And hopefully that'll work out. Now, if there are any exceptions or errors that occurs, right, then we'll throw a bad eBay credential exception. Okay, this is a new exception that we created, and it contains a string of an error message. And inside our exception handler, if we ever get this exception thrown to us, then what Spring will do is Spring will grab it, and it will return an internal server error. And what's an internal server error? An internal server error is a code 500. So that's what we'll end up giving back to the users. So that's the kind of general gist, the logic of what we did today. Now, we haven't actually ran the program. We haven't debugged it yet. So that's next week. But that's kind of a brief overview of what we did in today's session. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Any questions before we kind of end today and I upload what we got?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you can upload just the code or the video.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In
Okay.
fact, okay, we probably shouldn't be. Right. Let me go ahead and actually, I would like to push on the main branch myself because it's my repo, but it's bad practice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new branch. So I'll do feature / and we actually have a ticket number. So if I go here, it's con-6, right? So con-6. So I'm going to create a new branch, create branch. I'm going to bring my changes there. And I'm going to do an init commit. I'm going to publish and upload all my changes that I did today onto this branch. And then I'm going to create a pull request. And inside my pull request, I'm going to start with a devmoji. So let me show you what a devmoji is. A gitmoji, so that's what it's called. A gitmoji basically tells very, very simply in the very beginning what kind of PR this is. So say, for example, if I did a bug fix, I'm going to start it with a bug emoji. In this case, I'm using Hammer because I am adding or up. Oh, this is development scripts. My bad. So today's change was a Sparkle introduces new features, right? So I'm going to add a sparkles, and inside the title, I'm going to say updated eBay client to use eBay native dependency Maven. So inside a description, I can say we removed eBay's eBay client. What was it? Raw API calls for authentication and replaced it with eBay's Maven package to generate application tokens instead. Okay, and then I'm going to one more thing. We also created an endpoint to generate SAID tokens. Yeah, just like that. And we're going to create a pull request. And if you guys don't mind, I'm actually going to send this over to you, Greg, and the other Greg, and Amber. So what you guys are going to do is you guys are going to go into the file changes and assume that you didn't watch me do all this today. Say, for example, I'm doing my own thing, you're doing your own thing, right? And I send you this pull request. You're going to go ahead and look through and see all the changes, all the code changes that I did today, right? And you're going to go ahead and click review changes, and you're going to either submit a comment saying like, hey, this is not right, this is not right, these are things that I want you guys to take a look at, or you guys can approve or request changes, right? So usually speaking, you want 1 or 2 approvals saying that, hey, this code is good. And then you're going to go ahead and click and confirm the merge. So then you guys are going to merge your branch back into main. So now if I go into main and I fetch it, you can see that my changes were pulled in successfully. So that's kind of like also how you should be pushing your changes onto the main branch. So yes. All right. Anything else? Any other concerns, questions, comments?
No, we're good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, well, it was very fun having all of you guys on. Thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording real quick here. I don't know how to do that. It's okay. It'll automatically stop when I end the meeting. But cool. Thanks for joining, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye.